IB Nation, Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel, our new partners of FanDuel. That's Sean Davis. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we are back ready to rock and roll with the latest Notre Dame RTCF show. For those who are new to this or forget, RTCF means we are going to talk about a recruiting topic, R, a Notre Dame team topic, T, and then we're going to talk about a college football topic, which is the CF, RTCF show. And today's three topics, we're going to begin by talking about the state of the recruiting at cornerback, and that's going to be a pretty positive show based on how recruiting has gone at the position. I'm going to break down the past, present, and future of recruiting at that position. That'll be topic number one today. Topic number two, our Notre Dame topic, is going to be who are the players that Sean and I believe have to break out for Notre Dame this year. Not guys that we think will break out, but guys that have to break out. Who are the guys that Notre Dame needs to step up and play at a high level if this program is going to achieve the success it's capable of? We'll talk a few guys on offense, a few guys on defense, have some fun with it. And speaking of big-time players, the final show is we're going to look at the top Heisman candidates. And so we're going to look at FanDuel's odds of Heisman candidates, talk about each player. We're going to talk about Notre Dame players that are the highest candidates, which is interesting. At FanDuel, it's not Jeremiah Love as the number one player, best odds for Notre Dame to win the Heisman Trophy. And then we've got a few sleeper picks for you as well they're going to talk about when it comes to the Heisman Trophy. But, Sean, first topic for today, we are going to talk Notre Dame cornerback recruiting. We're going to talk past, present, and future. But just big picture, boy, I got to tell you, Sean, it is night and day with where we've been. Just talking about a big picture, and this is a position that Notre Dame is. When we were kids, Notre Dame was pumping out big time corners every year. I mean, it was Todd Light, Tom Carter, Bobby Taylor. Just Jeff Burris starts at corner, moves to safety. They were so loaded at corner. And there were years they had backup corners getting drafted into the NFL draft. And then they kind of went through a period where it was some good moments. In the 2000s, I think the best corner that Notre Dame had was a former soccer player that was a walk-on. It was like a Jordan Faison type of player who, was a Division I caliber football player, but was considered even better in another sport, hit soccer for Shane Walton and lacrosse for Jordan Faison. And then you get into the last 20 years, it's been some moments, some Robert Blantons, Darren Walls early in his career before injuries and other things kind of impacted him. Obviously Julian Love and Troy Pride were a great combination, but it was really good for a couple of years and then down, and then really good for a couple of years and then down. It just couldn't find that consistency. And honestly, Sean, even the best players they had were not like elite players. Shane Walton was a heck of a college player, but he wasn't an elite player, like an elite talent. He wasn't a first, second round draft pick type of player. And Julian Love was a heck of a college football player, but was another guy that was, not going to translate to being an elite corner at the next level. He wasn't that 6'1", 4'3", 4'4" type of guy. So you fast forward to the Mike Mickens era, things start off well, or not super well for him, because Mike Mickens is like, hey, welcome to Notre Dame. And by the way, your first recruiting class has to be recruited entirely from your office because of COVID. You couldn't go on the road and get to know kids. You couldn't have kids visit. That 2021 class had some players with some tools, but also there were some risks being involved there. And one of the players they got that I liked a lot, there were some red flags that they didn't really know that I think they would have probably landed and found out if they could go on the road and have gone to his high school, things like that. But starting with the 2022 class, Sean, until recently, we have seen things change dramatically. And then looking forward, it's really in a great place. But I think this is one of those positions, Sean, that for a long time, people thought Notre Dame can't recruit that position at an elite level. And what Mike Mickens has done, and we'll get into specifics here in a second, but what Mike Mickens has done, big picture, is he's proven that's false. Just absolutely not true. If you can evaluate properly and you can sell this and you can put a good product on the field, you can recruit big-time players in Notre Dame. Sometimes they'll be highly ranked, like a Christian Christian Gray, like a Kari Adams. Sometimes they'll be under the radar guys like a Benjamin Morrison, like a Leonard Moore. But the fact is, the one common denominator, all are elite talents. You can recruit those type of players in Notre Dame if you're willing to put into work, if you're someone who has talent as a coach and a recruiter. And the narrative about recruiting cornerback at Notre Dame in the last 4 years has just dramatically changed. I would argue more than any position on this football team.
It's amazing because when you say that, it takes me all the way back to when Marcus Freeman introduced his new coaches. Harry Heastan had returned. Mike Mickens was there. You had Al Washington, who had come onto the staff. You had the new wide receiver coach, Chancey Stuckey. And I remember walking in the room, and you couldn't make it. So I'm walking around the room with 3 recorders, placing them at tables. But the first person I got a chance to sit down and talk to was Mike Mickens during that time, which is right in the middle of COVID when you were talking about. And just talking to him and getting a long, he was talking about this day and the room being in this form. Even then, he had a vision. He had a vision, and he knew exactly how he wanted to go about things. And it's really easy to be able to do that when you are really good at evaluating the position. We know the difficulties of, number one, recruiting at Notre Dame because it's a little bit different. But because of the way he coaches the game and the way he looks at evaluation, he knows which kids, and you go, like you said, the red flag, not being able to get out on the road. One of the other things that makes him a great evaluator is he's a great evaluator of the person. And so that goes hand in hand with what you need to bring in to that defensive back room at Notre Dame. So it starts right there with Mike Mickens. It starts with the plan, knowing what he wanted to do, and then being able to evaluate the player on the field and the young man off the field, and then just having, the development side, which he brought with him to Notre Dame because he was doing it at Cincinnati. So you knew he had that in his back pocket.
There was always these reasons why you couldn't recruit top players to Notre Dame. And there's always this belief of, well, you need a corners coach like this guy and a corners coach like this guy. And a lot of them are sort of like those snake oil salesmen. You know what I mean? Like they sell, they spin it. And the thing about Mike Mickens is his approach was, no, I'm going to be authentic and genuine. And if a kid doesn't want that, then I don't want him. And you saw it to where early on, you had to go work to find those guys. You couldn't get the 5-star guy in his first class. You had to go out there and find some hidden gems, and he did that in Benjamin Morrison. Also got Jaden Mickey in that class, who was actually the higher ranked player by the national services over Benjamin Morrison. And then once you got Benjamin Morrison and he had the success he had, that opened up some doors and opportunities for him to then the next year go out and get a Christian Gray, who was a young man that was looking at Notre Dame, LSU, Ohio State. So the 2 schools that are battling to be known as DBU. And for a while there, it was funny. He was trending towards Ohio State at one point, and then LSU at another point. And you'd talk to people around the program, and you'd say, like, how's Coach Mickens feeling about Christian Gray? And he's like, oh, he's fine. Well, what do you mean he's fine? He's like, he knows that when it's all said and done, Christian's going to realize he's a Notre Dame kid. But he just stayed the course. He didn't sit back and wait on Christian to come back to him. He just stayed the course and let all the other flashiness do their thing. And then when that all died down, it's like, here I am, still telling you the same thing I've been telling you. They end up winning that recruiting battle. And then you obviously go in, that's the 2023 class. Then you go into the 2024 class, and you get Leonard Moore, you get Carson Hobbs, who they flipped from South Carolina. You go to the 2025 class, you land Dallas Golden, who's a big-time player, top 100 recruit. You get Mark Zachary, who's a top 100 recruit. You get Cree Thomas, who is a combination of sort of that sleeper prospect. And so the success he had recruiting and developing Benjamin Morrison, and then the success he had converting Cam Hart to corner, which happened even before Marcus Freeman got here as the head coach. It was actually during Marcus Freeman's year as defensive coordinator when they started that process. Really took it to another level, because Cam played some corner in 2020, but he was, didn't play a lot during that COVID year, missed all the offseason development. But Mickens started it really then. and then took it to another level in 2021. Then you get to 2022. By the end of the year, you've got Benjamin Morrison playing like a freshman All-American. Cam Hart's game started to really take off, and you saw how important Cam Hart was against USC when they didn't have him in 2022. And all of a sudden, the pass defense wasn't good anymore. And because they just could avoid Benjamin Morrison, they threw at him once, almost got picked, and Caleb Williams never threw at him again. And then you realize the next year, wow, it was smart for him not to throw at Benjamin Morrison like at all. But 2023 comes, and now all of a sudden Notre Dame's putting one of the best cornerback tandems on the field in college football. Cam Hart, 5th-round draft pick, nothing to, write home about. But what does Cam do as a rookie? He earns a starting job for the Chargers. And it's like, okay, like this guy knows what he's doing. And so the success he had in evaluating players, developing players, has now led to where you're able to evaluate and develop players that have even higher floors and higher ceilings, like a Kari Adams. And obviously you've got Aiden Pouncey in this incoming class. So when you look at the current depth chart, Sean, and you break down the cornerback position, it's a younger group, but it's an incredibly talented group and a deeper group of high-level players because of that recruiting success. And the fact is what's interesting is you have that depth despite your first class being gone prematurely. Obviously, Jaden Mickey transferred because he was getting beat out by younger players. And I think there was a desire also by Jaden to I think he needed a break from it all, to be honest with you. I think that semester of going to class and all that after the tragedy he had to endure personally probably was good for him. And then getting closer to home. I mean, Boise, Idaho, he originally went to Cal and then, committed to Cal. And he's going to be Boise. He's still a lot closer to home where his family is out in California after, losing his mom. And then, of course, Benjamin Morrison goes to the NFL. And then it's just that next man in mentality. So then, you've even had some departures. Micah Bell transfers out. Why did he transfer out? Because he was struggling to work up the depth chart. And so, but even then, I'm watching last year's spring game, Sean, and you saw Micah Bell with a couple breakups in that game, got beat for a touchdown, but also had a couple breakups in that game, a fourth down breakup in that game. And then, of course, you the Christian Gray class, or Christian Gray does well. And then, of course, you have last year's freshman class. And the ability to stack the depth chart in ways that we have not seen in the past, where from like 2016 to 2019, the cornerback depth chart was primarily just developed by one class. It was the Julian Love, Troy Pride, Dante Vaughn class. And then that was it. And then when that class was gone, it was like you had to go get, Nick McLeod out of the portal. You had to play a true freshman in Clarence Lewis, and those were your starters basically on a team that went and played for, college football and made it to the college football playoff, played for the ACC championship. To see where it was then in Mike Mickens' first year as a coach to where it is now, again, I don't know that there's a position on the depth chart that has seen a more dramatic turnaround because of the recruiting of Mike Mickens than what we've seen at the cornerback position.
And I know for me, I think him having the responsibility of both defensive back and safety was a challenge that he really needed at that point in his career as a coach. Because I think it proved his flexibility and the layers and nuance of his development and his ability to be able to recruit an entire secondary and then teach and develop an entire secondary. But it also, from a coaching standpoint, and this, you can have one message going to the safeties and one message going to the cornerbacks. The blessing is now everyone in that defensive back room is being spoken to from the same voice and they're hearing the same voice. So you want to talk about continuity, and you want to talk about how that secondary came together last year and became elite at each level. That's something that's a trend that I would expect. And if I were a betting man, I would bet that that's going to continue, especially with the young talent in the freshman class that we're going to talk about. But just the overall job that Mike Mickens has done has been nothing short of incredible. Yeah. And the amount of time that he did it in. It's been nothing short of incredible. I go back to just watching that. I'm telling you that, first of all, because I think it was kind of a joint, if I can remember correctly, the decision for Cam Hart to go to the defensive side of the ball was kind of a joint decision. With Cam Hart had interest, they had interest in moving him. He comes over, and at that point in time, what you pointed out, because of the lack of numbers,
that started even before Mike Mickens got here. It was late in Cam's freshman year. It was kind of a Clark Lee defensive staff, Chip Long offensive staff saying he's a ways away. He was dealing with a shoulder injury at the time. So, yeah, you're correct. It was sort of a staff decision on let's let him try it out. And if it doesn't work, we can always bring it back over to receiver.
And the crazy thing is, when Mike Mickens shows up, he needs Cam Hart to be that guy. I remember in the offseason, the buzz was how good he looked playing the position. And you know how it is when you hear about it. We've been doing this for a long time. You hear about a buzz, but there's still something in the back of our minds, specifically at certain positions at Notre Dame. It's kind of a PTSD where you have to say, I don't know if I'm going to trust it until I actually see it. And so for me, I think I love seeing people that represent or bookmark the turnaround for a program, or the turnaround or the transition for a program. And Cam Hart is that. 10 years down the line, where we think Notre Dame is going to have several players in that defensive backfield going on to the NFL and performing well on the college level, it all goes back to the roots of Cam Hart, his development. And I think that speaks, and his leadership and what he brought to that room. Because I think he set the standard for how to work.
Yes.
He took it from Mike Mickens, the plan, and then he implemented it. And everybody that was Ben Morrison got a chance to watch him. And then Benjamin Morrison got a chance to pass it down to Adon and Christian. And that is how you start a long list and a long line of great development and play in a particular room. It has to start with somebody that's able to take it from the coach, implement it, and be that living and walking example on the field. And for me, that bookmark will always be Cam Hart.
Well, I mean, Sean, it's one of those things where it goes back to a comment that you made earlier in the process. And Cam wasn't so much a Mike Mickens protege from the standpoint of he recruited him, but he did develop him at Notre Dame. But if you go back and look from 2010, Brian Kelly's first year, this isn't a Brian Kelly statement. It's just literally a point of reference. And you go from 2010 and you go all the way to 2021, which was the last year of the tenure of Brian Kelly. Notre Dame had a grand total of one captain who played cornerback at Notre Dame. One. And then Mike Mickens gets here, the players he evaluated, the way he coached, the type of players they brought in. They've had two captains in a row, 23 and 24. Cam was captain at 23. Benjamin Morrison was captain at 24. Sometimes you wonder, like, okay, is that guy really a captain, or is he just being named a captain because he's one of your best players? Well, if you watch the Here Come the Irish series, you realized Benjamin was a captain. Like, he wasn't just a guy that got the moniker because he was one of your best players, which we know Notre Dame has done in the past, and you kind of get it. You're like, look, this is our best player. We got to throw a C on his jersey, even though he's not necessarily a lead by the right way all the time guy. But you realize Benjamin was that. And he was absolutely – I mean, I'll still forget watching that video of him coming in before the Indiana game and telling Marcus Freeman, like, hey, listen, I'm already hearing Georgia talk in the locker room. Like, we need to nip that in the bud, basically. Like, we're not focused on this. What does Benjamin Morrison care? You're not even playing. What? That's what you might. But no, this is because he's still just as invested in this because as a leader, he took that. Hey, I can't help this team win on the field, so let me try to help this team off the field. That speaks to the type of young men that he's recruiting. You listen to things that Marcus Freeman talks about Leonard Moore. And the work ethic and the attitude. And we've got to know both of us have got to know Christian Gray really well. And it's like, it's not just talented players, but it's a type of young person. I hear similar things about about Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary, and I think that's a big part of it. And I'll make the statement here, Sean, before we kind of talk about the present and future of the recruiting position. I'm going to make this statement right here. Mike Mickens has done for the Notre Dame secondary, especially corner, but we're seeing in the recruiting trail, it also in coaching. I mean, you look at how quickly he got a redshirt freshman into Don Schuler ready to go and shine last year. The job he did in really helping Xavier Watts, because I think Xavier Watts' game was much better last year than even it was the year before. I think Mike Mickens deserves a lot of credit for that. But I'll say this, Mike Mickens, and I'm just going to continue setting it up, Sean. You know how I feel about certain coaches, so this statement's going to mean something to you. I think you know where I'm going with this. Mike Mickens has done for the Notre Dame secondary what Harry Hiestand did for the Notre Dame offensive line. He took it to a whole new level of dominance, of recruiting consistency, and of national respect. And then from within the team and the fan base, an assumption that, well, of course that position is going to be good because Mike Mickens is coaching it. Just like I felt about Harry. Well, of course the offensive line is going to at least be pretty good. It's going to be some level of dominance because depending on fact, experience, and all these other things, but you just knew Notre Dame's offensive line was not going to be the reason you were going to lose a bunch of games when Harry Hiestand was at Notre Dame. And you feel that way about I do. I feel that way about what Mike Mickens has done an equal good job. The impact, the turnaround, the development, the mindset. Coach Hiestand was really into you got to prepare a certain way. There was a high level of expectations. I remember telling a story or being told a story by, and I'll just say it, it was Robert Hainsey's dad was telling me the story. And Robert was a starter, and Robert comes to a meeting without a couple things he needed for the meeting. And Coach Hiestand made him leave and go back. And like, nope, you're going to do this. Like, and it was something simple like he didn't have a pad, like a notepad or something like it was. And made him go back and get it because his thing was you're going to prepare a certain way every single day. It wasn't just about we're relying on your talent. We're going to rely on your ability, which I think a lot of corner coaches do. Hey, I'm just going to go let him play. I'm not going to. Mike Mickens is like, no. I'm going to let you play, but I'm going to teach you how to play. And then you're going to go shine. There's the same level of expectations for technical excellence, mental focus, toughness, mindset, discipline that we saw Coach Hiestand implement on the O-line as he built Notre Dame into the dominant offensive line factory in all of college football. And I think Mike Mickens has done that same thing for the Notre Dame secondary and cornerback, especially because that's the focus here. It started at corner, and the way he's recruiting is you can see it's going to continue. First of all, before we about the continue thing, I want to get your response because you know how I feel about Harry Hiestand as a coach. You know. And the most impactful assistant coach Notre Dame has had since Joe Moore, Barry Alvarez are on the same staff. Just that's how I felt about Harry Hiestand. This is the only other coach to me that's on that level that Notre Dame's had the last 20 years. And I'm talking like elite level where you're saying that's the best in the business right there. And that's what I think Notre Dame has right now under
I think the only way you said it perfectly, and I don't want to mess it up or step on it. I'll just say this. I think you're correct. And in saying that, I think he has created the same thought process in recruiting that happens before he even reaches out to a young man. If you're playing that position, just as Harry did, if you're playing offensive line, Notre Dame is automatically in your top 10. It doesn't even matter if they even offered you or reached out. That's a room that you want to play in to get respect and be developed and eventually go on to the NFL. You know those rooms. Iowa is one of those rooms. Notre Dame is one of those rooms where they're already in the top 10 because of the standard. That is being developed by Mike Mickens. And honestly, it might be there for the long haul because it's there now and Harry's no longer here. That's the incredible job. That's when you do an incredible job of creating a legacy. That legacy stands and continues, even if you're not at the head of that particular position room. And Mike Mickens is developing this room to be at that point that we hope he's here, all of us, for the next 10 years. That's what we hope, but we don't know what the future holds. But I fully believe that the success, because of what he has established and what he has rooted, it will continue to grow if he does decide to go elsewhere for whatever reason 4 or 5 years from now. That's just what he's established. And I think you've made the correct correlation between the job that Harry Heastand did for that offensive line room and what Mike Mickens has done for the defensive back. Who knew that the fact that we're sitting here, I would have never thought that we've known each other for a long time, over a decade. I would have never thought we were going to have this conversation ever, whether it's on the phone or whether it's on the show, that we're talking about the defensive back room being at this level.
And Sean, we were optimistic when Mike Mickens got hired that it would be better. I didn't see this coming. I mean, because we did see what he did at Cincinnati. I remember studying. He had a freshman All-American. He had a kid that was an All-MAC player, as a true freshman at Bowling Green, Nick Johnson. And obviously the job he did with Sauce Gardner, turning him into a freshman All-American in 2019 at Cincinnati. And you're like, well, hey, look, I think this is going to be good. Like, this is going to be a good position coach. But I didn't envision this. I didn't envision like the recruiting being what it was. I didn't envision the development being to the degree that it is. And obviously he's got a big test in front of him this season, getting Christian Gray to take his game to another level. You got to find a starter opposite of Don Schuler. You got another nickel that you're transitioning, and you have a lot of young players that are going to have to be counted on. But it's to the point now where I look at the cornerback room and it's like you're too deep. Like we're at the first full practice, right? And they're on two fields, and you're looking at like there's a lot of talented freshmen and sophomores on the other field, which is like the younger players, not the too deep, so to speak. You know, Jadon Blair's down there with the other unit. Even Keedron Young and Aeneas Williams are down there with the younger unit. You have a lot of these really talented younger players that are down there. Well, then you have, but on the quote unquote, you know, top field, right, where the guys that are currently in the two deep, you've got Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary and Cree Thomas all working in. This because they have to, because the depth chart is in a position where, because Benjamin Morrison left early, because, you know, Jaden Mickey transferred, these young players are now in the two deep at different positions. And then you've got a redshirt freshman in the number 2 nickel. And I think I called you afterwards, or maybe I was talking with Trev, and I'm like, it's funny how this would have freaked me out 5 years ago. That Notre Dame's got all these young players, like 3 freshmen, at your entire depth chart at cornerback is made up of a true sophomore, a redshirt freshman, and 3 true freshmen, along with the quote-unquote veteran Christian Gray, who's a true junior. Like, and that have freaked me out 5-6 years ago, because I'd have been like, you're relying on a lot of young players. But it speaks to 2 things, Sean. Number one is the talent that he's bringing in now is a much higher level of player, where we're not talking about Clarence Lewis having to step in if something happens to Tariq Bracy or Nick McLeod. And I love Clarence Lewis, but he's not an elite caliber talent. He's just not. Great worker, great kid, but he's just not that type of player. And I don't mean that to disparage him. It's just the reality of the situation. He's just not an elite level player. Where now you're asking the Christian Grays and the Benjamin Morrisons and the Leonard Moores, and now the Dallas Goldens, Mark Zachary's, and Cree Thomases to step in and fill those roles as 2 deep players. So the talent is much greater, but then also there's just you got to show me. Well, Mike Mickens has kind of showed you. It's not even about the freshman players. Like, guys, he's not a freshman All-American and a real freshman, not like redshirt freshman, a true freshman All-American in 2 of the last 3 years. And if there was an injury in 2023, it would have been 3, because we saw Christian Gray step in for an injury-related incident once, and he was phenomenal against Pitt and had that crazy one-hand interception. So it's like, okay, I'm not worried about it because of the recruiting at the position and the development. But since this is sort of a recruiting focus show, that's the part that matters, because it's like, look, you're working with a higher caliber prospect now. And corner, like receiver, like running back, is not a position I ever get freaked out as much about a freshman playing just in theory. I would be panicked about it in the past because it was usually a freshman who didn't have the physical talent to help you right away. It was more of a projectable type of player. That's not the case when you're talking about Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray and Leonard Moore, and in my opinion, Dallas Golden, but maybe Mark Zachary, who, if you saw the video Notre Dame put out, pick six somebody yesterday in a practice inside the stadium on Sunday night. And that's where I think the state of the program from a recruiting standpoint is strong. The past coming into this year is strong, and the present class is strong as well, Sean. You've got Kari Adams, who's an elite prospect. Kari Adams is going to end up being the highest ranked player at cornerbacks, barring some, hey, we're going to drop him because he's at Notre Dame type of thing. Kari Adams is going to end up being the highest ranked Notre Dame corner recruit since they started doing recruiting rankings. Right now, Kari Adams is ranked number 29 overall by ESPN, number 37 overall by 247, and number 34 overall by the new Rivals on 3 rankings. And he's ranked as the number 22 overall player on the 24/7 composite list and ranked as a 5-star player. Darren Walls was ranked in the top 50, but he wasn't ranked this high. And obviously in recent seasons, Christian Gray was a top 100 player, but he wasn't ranked this high. Troy Pride was not a top 100 player. Julian Love was not a top 100 player. Rashawn McNeil was a top 100 player, but not ranked this high. So that's obviously a big pickup. And then your other two players, Aiden Pouncey and Chasten Smith, are both ranked as top 150 recruits by at least one recruiting service, I believe. And Kari Adams at 6'1", 185 is your smaller. 6'2", 185 is your shortest of the three corners, because Chaz Smith's close to about 6'2 and a half, and then Aiden Pouncey 6'3". So you're not only, okay, you got a great refreshment. I mean, there aren't many teams, Sean, that can go out and get Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, Cree Thomas in a class, and then followed up by getting Kari Adams and Aiden Pouncey and Chaz Smith. And then they added Kari Adams after they already had Aiden Pouncey and Chaz Smith in the class. And then to talk to people, and you cover recruiting some for IB, when you talk to Kari Adams and people around him, Aiden Pouncey and Chaz Smith were pushing him to join the class. There was no, I don't want that guy in the class. It was like, hey, bro, come join us. Because Mike Mickens has sold them on, hey, fellas, I'm not just playing two guys. We're going to rotate. We're going to have a corner nickel and all that stuff. But also it speaks to the type of young men that he's recruiting. And you've gotten to know Kari especially, Sean. And like you talk about, he's the next in line of the Benjamin Morrisons, the Leonard Moore, the Cam Hart type of worker. Because if you talk to Kari Adams, he's very aware that he's ranked high. But it's not in a way that it's like, yeah, man, I'm the man. It's like, it's a blessing. Now I got to go out and work and show it. And so I think when you look at the future of cornerback recruiting and what's coming in next year, it's like this thing's not slowing down anytime soon, Sean.
Talking about a young man who is uber talented, but his character might be just as great as his talent is, and Kari Adams. But you touched on something that I think I was impressed with Jawan Sider. And I think this speaks to what you were talking about with Mike Mickens and Aiden Pouncey, Chaz Smith recruiting Kari Adams. And I think it starts at the top. When Jawan Sider says, I was shocked to come into this room, new coach, and not one of these players that knew they had to wait still behind Jeremiah and Jadarian contemplated leaving. Like, he talked about how unselfish the running back room, and everyone is willing to wait their turn and play their role. And that starts at the top. That permeates throughout every other position room. So that's what helps the recruiting. That's what causes everyone in recruiting to be collaborative, where everybody is not worried about, so if this guy comes, what is it going to be like? Remember, so we heard some whispers about two guys that ended up being in the class together early on, people were wondering whether or not they would even go to the same school. In Notre Dame, they didn't care anything about that. But it just goes to, the collaborative effort and the selflessness that exists throughout the program in each position room. They don't care. We're going to find a way to play together. We were amazed, and we looked at each position and said, man, they have literally recruited positions in such a way that everybody they recruited in this cycle in 2026 can be on the field at the same time. Like, it's absolutely, we've never seen it like that in a full class. So, man, you have to be excited. You have to be excited. You tip your cap to Mike Mickens, but also just the overall vision of the program and the selflessness and how unselfish these players are. Like you said, they're recruiting more talent more talented players. But with that, which is even better, high IQ, high character players with extreme talent, which we were told we don't know if those guys want to come to Notre Dame, and we don't know if you can get those type of young men to Notre Dame. And for years, you and I have been saying they're out there. You just have to go get them. You have to go, you have to be willing to go fight for them because they are out there. Clemson found them. Clemson was able to find them.
Isaiah Simmons is a guy that wasn't a highly ranked recruit. Not everybody they got was a highly ranked recruit. Yeah. I know that AJ Mullen or AJ Terrell was a highly ranked recruit, but if I remember correctly, Trayvon Mullen was more of like a top 150 guy coming out of high school. He was number 120 overall by 247, number 117 overall by Rivals. He turns out to be a big time player. So, that's a important piece of this. Just looking to the future, Sean, we talked about the 26th class, but also Mike Mickens is already off to a great start in 2027. A couple names to keep an eye on. There's a young cornerback out of North Carolina named Xavier Hassan, very talented player, very high on Notre Dame so far. Hayden Stepp is another 6'2" cornerback out of Nevada. That's another player to keep an eye on, a guy that likes Notre Dame a lot, that Notre Dame likes. Notre Dame is trying to recruit John Meredith, who is an elite 5-star player. Right now, if he had a top 10, Notre Dame would probably be in it, but in the bottom. But we've seen that before. They weren't going to get Kari Adams 6 months ago. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not where
most people think it's a Texas school that's going to get them right now with a Texas.
Right. Yeah. But, like I said, it's early yet. That's another at least name to know. Ace Austin is a player out of Ohio that Notre Dame is on. Sincere Gaylor is a kid from Florida that Notre Dame is on. Larry Moon's a player that Notre Dame has been on for a while. So those are just some of the early names. There will be more players added to the board, but they're in a good place with a couple of those guys. Xavier Hassan especially is a player that I think that right now Notre Dame is in a pretty good position with. They seem to have some real good interest in him. And then Hayden Stepp's another guy to keep an eye on top of some of those other guys I talked about as a Bishop Gorman guy. I always get a little bit nervous when talking about Bishop Gorman guys, Sean, because Notre Dame just doesn't seem to have a great track record there. But these are elite level players. Xavier Hassan is ranked number 46 by 247, number 54 by ESPN, and number 60 by Rivals on 3. Hayden Stepp is ranked number 90 by the Rivals on 3 people, number 28 by 247, and number 8 nationally, and as a 5-star by ESPN. So, they're after some guys that are already being recognized as big time talents. But as we've talked about, Ace Austin's another kid. He's a top 150 kid by 247 in ESPN, 175 by Rivals. So like they're all recruiting ranking wise up there, but that to me is just kind of an added bonus because I feel like if Mike Mickens wants you, I don't really care what the recruiting rankings say. But in this case, it is Notre Dame getting more love from the guys that fit what Mike Mickens wants, but also are guys that are elite level players because those guys tend to be more ready a little bit early. So it's they're already off to a fast start. Now it's about closing, but I think you look at cornerback recruiting, they're in a great place. There's no question.
I think those guys, because we talk about continuing to develop and grow the brand of the defensive back room. But for Mike Mickens personally, I can almost bet that Xavier Hassan, Hayden Stepp, John Meredith, those are the type of guys that are like, okay, that is the next step, or that is the holy grail that I'm chasing after. I want to go get 2 5-star top 50 guys in a class now. Like, I've proven that I can get the top 150 guys in the class collectively. But now let me go. Let me dare to go into Texas and take this kid, John Meredith from Texas A&M in Texas. Right. 5-star. Let me go and get a Hayden Stepp. Because I don't know the success. Notre Dame really hasn't had success getting kids from Bishop Gorman. So let me go and get a big time kid from Bishop Gorman. And then Xavier Hassan, who by the way will be on campus for that Texas A&M game. That's another big time kid. So I think it's always something that coaches are looking to challenge themselves, just as they challenge the players. If you're going to be good at what you do as a coach, you have to challenge yourself. And I think Mike Mickens, just looking at the list of kids that we haven't even mentioned, the local kid here in Chicago, Tavares Harrington, out of Chicago.
But I view him more as a safety. So like
he's more of a nickel safety. Yeah. Down
so like
the road.
For this purpose, I was more focusing on the guys that are
cornerbacks.
Josh Dobson's a kid that I didn't mention from South Carolina. That's another one that Notre Dame is trying to make a run on as well. So yeah, but it's a really good corner class, Sean. Just looking at it nationally, there's a lot of high level corners out there.
Does this class feel more zeroed in? Because I think as his classes grow, it seems like he starts to zero in more and more.
I think
higher talented kids.
Well, I don't know if it's about higher talented kids. I really just think it's just guys that he likes, and it's just so happens that they're higher talented kids. Like I think he's always pursued players like that. It's just there's now more reciprocal interest in from those players. Like a guy that Mike Mickens loved AJ Harris coming out, but his dad loved. I mean, family. Remember that family were big Notre Dame fans, but AJ just had no interest in Notre Dame. I have a feeling things would be a little bit different if AJ Harris is coming out now. So,
well, as the men that we are, it's a scripture that says faith and patience allows us all to obtain the promises. And I think we are seeing what Mike Mickens has done. He's been committed to the plan that he shared with me when I had a chance to sit down with him. And he's been very patient. And I think now we're seeing that on the offensive side, which is what, for fans, patience is one thing a lot of us don't have. I mean, it's just, you tell us to be patient. A kid gets on campus in April, or he comes into campus in June, and by August, we're like, man, he might be a bust. And it's like, whoa, relax. He's a freshman. And so that's what it takes through the process, because getting a kid to campus is what? A 2 to 3 year process, getting him to commit to your school, and then developing him and getting him to the point where he's an elite player for you is another year to 2 years. So you're talking about a total 5-year process that you have to stay with this kid from start to finish, and then another year where he goes on, plays at an elite level, and ends up leaving the program, which is a 6-year. I mean, that you have to be patient as a coach and committed in order to see the manifestation of what you believe in a young man. And I think hopefully we're starting to see that with Mike Brown, where he's going through that process of being able not only to go after kids. We saw in the last cycle, he got them on campus for officials, but he wasn't able to close. This year, he got them on campus, and he was able to close on a couple of those guys that he was challenging for. And the next step is Now, to get even more guys on campus and to go after even more talented kids.
24 was
Go
the
ahead,
year that
'cause-
24 was the year they had some struggles getting guys to close out after Leonard Moore. 25, Dallas was always a top target for them at corner. So was
no. I said what Mike Mickens has accomplished and what we've seen the process that he's gone through is similar to what Mike Brown is experiencing.
Got it. Okay.
With the wide receivers right now.
Totally makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes
We're watching him go through the same process of having to gain that respect from kids and get the reciprocal, desire
which
to
is
want to come.
Very similar. If you go back and look at to your point, the first couple of years of Mike Mickens, that first class, I mean, Mike Brown's first class is going to end up being better than Mike Mickens' first class, but it's not really fair to draw a direct comparison because Mike Brown's not going through the same world circumstances Mike Mickens went to. Then that second year, you go out and get Benjamin Morrison, you get Jaden Mickey, you kind of take that next leap. He was also the primary driver of, I believe, getting Jaden Bellamy that year as well. And then, like you said, it really started to take off after that. But there were some corners that they went after in the 21 class that they liked that they didn't get. It was kind of that similar thing. So, yes, that's a really good comparison. Very good comparison. But I was like, hold on a second. Like, I'm trying to remember who they missed last year. Receiver, definitely get that.
No.
I'm with you now. I'm with you now.
Yeah.
I lost you. That was a me problem. That was not a you problem. So, well, folks, that's going to do it for part one of our segment brought to you by FanDuel, where we talk about Notre Dame recruiting. We're going to get into a team topic next, Sean, that I'm very excited about. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do, folks, do us a favor. You see that little thumbs up button down there below? Go ahead and hit that for us. We would greatly appreciate that. Give us a like. If you're listening via podcast platform, if you're listening on YouTube, but if you're going to go back and if you have a podcast platform, one thing you can do to really help us out, all it does is take your time. Don't have to do anything financially, but just go to wherever you watch the podcast app, whatever app you watch our podcast, listen to our podcast, and give us a 5-star review and leave us a comment as to why you think we're 5-star. So you can it really helps us kind of promote the show and grow the show and expand the show, and it's just really, really, really helpful. So we appreciate that very much. And then of course we also have our CFB Nation show that we're putting more stuff out on. You can subscribe to that too on any of our podcast platforms, but also you can subscribe to it on our YouTube channel as well. Trev and I are today going over our content plan for the year and talking about what are we going to do for CFB Nation. Sean and I are going to have some conversations about that as well. So you're definitely going to want to check that out and subscribe. Make sure you're also subscribed to what we're doing at CFB Nation.